Okay, guys, so I want to tell you this. This is a simple way to understand modern art. Like, they try to tell you that modern art became ugly or just like crazy all of a sudden. But really what happened was that like all these kind of complicated ways affected how art changed, but really the huge thing that happened is art became about color. But there, like that could have happened in a bunch of different ways without people realizing it. But really, that's what it happened. Like that's what happened. It became about color, because if you look at it for like hundreds of years, like when you look at paintings, like most of all the paintings are brown. Like because the colors, like even when they're like super realistic and detailed, then like they're still like really dark, or there's like a lot of light and a lot of dark, so it kind of creates like a neutral brown or gray. Like a lot of old paintings for hundreds of years are just really brown and dark. And so like when you look at paintings that are like from 100 years ago till now, there's a huge shift, which is actually like it's so simple. Like if you just put like raw pure color, or like basically it's just like a return to like putting pure pigment on the canvas without screwing around with it. Like the minute you try to draw something detailed or representational, you're actually making the colors muddy or brown or whatever. So like it sounds simple, but it's kind of complicated to keep a picture not muddy or not brown. Like, and the thing is that's so simple is that like those raw pure colors have a raw power and energy that you can't deny. Like it's like they speak psychologically to you because they are like raw pure colors. It's like raw pure pigment. It makes you feel good because like it's the same reason that colors affect, or flowers affect you so much, because they're like really really vibrant colors. And I'm not saying it has to be that bright or whatever, but it's just like the intensity. But it's not just about the color, it's about the textures too. It's kind of like the way that the paint is applied. So people started doing all kinds of like stuff that they said looked like crap, but actually it didn't. Like when you see those paintings in real life, they look cool because like the paint is applied in a way that's really appealing to the mind and to the soul, because it's like raw and it's simple and it's powerful. Like you just, like you can't really compete with that. So it's like all the old paintings might be good for different things, but they're still brown. Whereas all of a sudden now you have like pure colors speaking to you. Like it's just like a fact of life and psychology that those like bright colors affect your consciousness with joy and like all these positive things. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they are better, but at the very least you can say you like it for different things. But it is kind of hard to compete with the fact that like you say, okay, well, if old paintings are great in some ways, but imagine if those old paintings were made with like really vibrant and raw colors and pigments and things like that they started to think more about using in the modern era, then they'd probably be even better. That's the logical conclusion. So you can't really compete with the fact of what, it's just like anything else in science or technology. It's just like ridiculous to look at how like it competes with the past. Like it's obvious. And I'm the same way. It's like when I look at science and technology, I'm like, well, yeah, like things, like you ruined the things from the past because now everything creates pollution, right? So in a way that's true too with art. It's like you could kind of say like you ruined all this stuff, but like with art it's actually like a better comparison, because like science and technology and industry actually do create pollution. So it's like, even though they created all these advances, they also create all this pollution and all these negative byproducts and things that are really kind of bad or evil. And so that's a real serious problem. So it's like, we've got the good with the bad. Whereas in art, it's more just like, well, you can do whatever you want. You can do something like the old style or the new style, but the advantage is that the new style is much more advanced in terms of education and psychology. Like, it's just like a simple fact that those colors, it's like, what are paintings for? They're to take like that dry dead spot on your wall and introduce some color and stuff like that. Like, you don't, half the time you don't even know what's on, what the picture's about. It's just the fact, like, in reality, right? Like often intelligent people are interested in the whole content or the different things that the painting's about, right? But a lot of times it's more just like, you want something interesting to fill that sort of dead spot on your wall, or dry spot. So obviously you would want like rich color and textures, you know, like things that are really tactile or whatever. Like, whenever you see great so-called masterpieces, like modern masterpieces or great works, in real life, they're very, very intense and tactile, and like the textures are just like incredible. Like, to me, it's mesmerizing. Like, when you look at them, it's not, it has nothing really to do with what the painting is about, even though that's a cool part of it for people that are into that. It's just like, all the great paintings, like, the people handle the paint in a masterful way, like, where like, they're obviously like professional in a way. Like, it might look like really chaotic and disorganized, but that's because they're professional and they don't care. Like, they're not like timid or careful or whatever. They're actually really generous and like abundant. They're like really like they take risks and they make a mess, and like, and they play with the medium to exploit it so that it produces the maximum amount of power and effects with that given medium, which is paint, right? So, like, that again is like any other field of like activity or event or investigation in life. The people that are really good at it, obviously they know exactly how to maximize the power of it. It could be music, or it could be like sports or science or technology or anything. Like, the people at that level, they are obviously good at it and comfortable at it, and they can really exploit that to its maximum ability. So, like, that is basically what art became about, in a way. But like, the problem is that, like, it's still kind of complicated, because what you have to do is to try to create um like, you still have to kind of create ideas. Like, in a way, what's difficult, like, for one, you need to like know how to exploit the materials and stuff. Like, it's almost like you need to know, like, you need to practice at making a mess with it. That's the weird thing. It's like, you need to make a really good big mess. Like, you can't just make like a little sissy mess. Like, you need to make a really big mess, and it has to be like, you can't be wimpy. It's got to be like heavy duty, and it's got to be like intense. It's like a famous uh what do you call it, like a famous orchestra piece or whatever. It's got to be like, like very intense and interesting. So that's one thing that makes it hard, is like basically you have to practice at using those materials in that way that creates those color combinations. And then in a way, what's tricky is because then you're so focused on color that if you kind of just do paintings that are all about color, then that kind of flops too, because you actually need an idea. Like, it's not just about color, but in a way it is. Like, in a way, like, that's kind of the secret, is like paintings now are literally just about color. Like, you just make a mess. Like, what I always say is that color looks great, and it does. Like, I swear, like, when you just like when you're painting and it's like your mixing tray or the crap on the floor, like all the places where you're mixing your paint or the paint is dropping, they look awesome. Like, I always get inspiration from that, and that's been like for decades. I'm always saying, like, half the time I'm just literally trying to copy that or the ideas I see just on the spilled paint. Why? Because that raw color, it just looks awesome. So that's the secret, is like, it's actually just throwing shit on the canvas. It looks great. But like, we've all seen that. We've all like seen that done before, but like those people kind of like do it in a way that's not very natural. It's way too controlled. Like, people that just splatter paint on, like, the people that are good at it don't just splatter it in some like rhythmical way, because then it looks cheesy. They use a brush, they use all kinds of different things. They smear it, they stain it, they do all kinds of different things. They draw, they like smudge and smear, and like they do all kinds of things. They draw with sticks or whatever. Like, it just things that make it interesting. But then what happens is like I'm always saying, like, just raw paint looks great, almost like it's almost good enough on its own, and in many cases it is. But then like some people look at stuff like that and they're like, oh, that looks like crap, or my kid could do that, or that's boring. And they're kind of right, in the sense that sometimes that is what happens, but most of the time, if it's done well, then the color could literally speak for itself. Like, when you see raw, it's kind of like a question of raw pigment. Like, it's like, you think like painting, it's like just this cheesy thing that artists do, which is like really different than like raw pigment. It just looks amazing. It's like, when you see raw pigment, like, for me, it reminds me kind of like when I would see like chalk, when I'd see chalk colors that were really bright. It's like, it kind of almost makes you salivate just looking at them. Like just looking at the raw colors are so kind of lush and amazing that you don't really have to do anything. Like, just the raw colors in stick form or in powder form are so amazing. So again, just like adding water and solvents and fluids, it just creates even more interest. However, for the most part, if you just do, like, let's say an all pink painting or whatever, like, that's actually been done already. But like, it's harder than it seems, because you need to have practiced it. It's not as easy as it looks. Like, you still kind of need to know how much fluids you're mixing and all that. And when you're doing it on a big scale to make it look interesting, it's kind of complicated. But it's not that hard. But generally, people, it takes them you'd say at least few years, if not decades, or if not like half of their lifetime, to figure out those certain chemical combinations of pigments and solvents, and how to dilute it and all that stuff. So that is one thing on its own. But in order to pull that off where you just limited to color, that's actually pretty hard, because it's like you can fall into a trap where it just becomes boring. It's like an all pink painting or an all pink, and like, even though, like, again, that is interesting. Like, I've seen almost all red paintings, or like, but that are like really gestural. and like textural and stuff, and they look really cool. But like I find it like that kind of still is boring. It's almost like just looking at a wall that was painted red by like a really bad painter. Like anybody could do that in a way. It's just like, except you didn't, you didn't dilute the paint at all. You just use raw paints. But like generally you need to add more than one color to get that visual kind of like that interest, like that you need a little bit of like contrast or whatever too. So like you kind of have to add more colors, and the minute you add any other colors, if you don't know what you're doing, you could start to make it brown or neutralize it too. And I'm not saying like you can't have that, you can have that intensity with some sort of browns and neutral colors too if you know what you're doing. Like some of the first abstract paintings, like the cubist works, there was lots of browns and grays, but it's still really, really rich and vibrant. It doesn't look like bland or brown. Like the old paintings are brown and bland because they weren't really considering that overall effect. They were so busy with detail on everything that they kind of didn't realize that it's actually brown. Like I'm serious, like when you look at those paintings, like if you look in a gallery, it's just like you look at a modern painting and it's just like exploding color. And again, I'm not saying this is all about just bright colors that blow your mind because they're so bright and cheerful. It's not like that. It's more like you see a painting that is really rich and powerful, and then the painting beside it, like, yeah, you might know it's the Mona Lisa, but then on the other hand, you're like, that is a very brown painting. Like when you compare it to the one beside it, you're like, man, that painting, it's like juicy. It's like it makes you almost salivate. And then when you look at the Mona Lisa, you're like, that painting is just brown and like piss colored. Like it's just like, it's ugly. Like if it's just like it's just it's it's like it's like the color and texture of a potato or something. Like, yeah, the potatoes are great, but it's like the color is like almost like earth. It's like really boring and stuff. I mean, that's what makes a potato great, is that it's so kind of like the whole goodness of it comes from its elemental simplicity. But it's not good for painting. You don't want, like, you're just like, that painting, like, I know it's by that famous artist or that, but it's like if I step 10 feet back, it's very brown, and it kind of like it's kind of like depressing. Like you doesn't matter what's going on in there, but like our mind works on a level where it appreciates poetry and ideas and colors and all these different things at the same time, right? But I don't want to overcomplicate it. Like what I'm saying is that we can appreciate the Mona Lisa or all kinds of different paintings in the way that they were done. Like I personally can. Like I can say, like, I appreciate, I find appreciation in that and that and that and that and all these different things. But at the same time, I'm kind of like a child of the modern age, where it's like once you kind of taste the modern age, kind of like when you live in the modern age, like when you drive a car, it's like you're not going back to walking or whatever. It's just like that's like just a fact of reality. And it's the same with art. It's like when you experience it on the full intensity, then you just kind of like, you already know that. So you're like, well, what about if those old paintings caught up to the new knowledge? That's more what you're left to think, in my opinion. However, what I'm saying on the other hand is that when you know this about color and stuff, it's almost like the painting really, just becomes about color, because color is so important then. But it's not just color, it's kind of that the texture is really important too, like whether you use a brush or, like, depending on how, like, those textures really bring out the color. So color and texture are very closely linked. And So that's one thing, but then the other thing is that like I said, if you just strictly make the paintings about color and texture, then you run into a problem where either that's hard to pull off or it's just not necessarily enough because people want some kinds of like narrative. That's the actual simple word. Like people want some kind of, so the other thing that artists really are consumed with is, and this is kind of the other thing that I think people are way too hard on art because they don't get it. Like they don't get what art is about. Like people are always talking about narrative now, but this is what like modern art is all about from day one. Like it's about creating a narrative. Like I was always like, when I first got into art, I was like, I found it fascinating that you're creating a narrative that totally is like bullshit. Like it doesn't mean anything, but I love that idea for some reason. Like cuz everything else in life has to have meaning, but all of a sudden you're trying to create something that doesn't make sense, but it seems like it does. So you're trying to create a narrative. But then at the same time you get beyond that too after a while. Like you already know that you're doing that, and then like what it is like you're trying to create a narrative for the sake of art. Like when people talk about art for art's sake, that's what it means. Is like it's beyond the fact that we even need a narrative to make it interesting. Like as artists, you already know that in a way and you forget about that, and the fact is like you just try to create narratives, but what you really want to do is create narratives. Like pretty much all the best painters create narratives that don't really mean anything or make sense. Like a lot of the greatest painters have always done the same things, which is kind of use the same themes, like the portrait. Why? Because people always react to one, how humans are painted. Then there's still lives, then there's landscapes, then there's scenes, then there is a few basic themes like mother and child. So like what happens is like these different narratives, like when people look at it, then the narrative cancels itself out and it allows you to just look at how the paint is applied. So each artist has their own personality with how they apply the paint, but you need to present a narrative in order to deliver the paint. So, unlike most things in life where it's about the meaning and the content, in art it's reversed. It's not about the narrative. It's about, like, it's kind of the same in a way with some things. It's like the movies. It's not really about the narrative. It's the narrative is about the movie. Like the movie is the vehicle for showing you the new technology or even the new kind of like ideas and thoughts that are going on, like the poetry of the age, you know, like the things that are savvy and sexy and funny and interesting. And so the narrative, it doesn't matter if it's like, you know, like a drama, comedy, or whatever. It's just like the narrative is like, it's just the plot is only to show the latest in film and thinking. So it doesn't matter what the story is. But it what's kind of funny is that it comes down to again the same thing, is that the narrative is almost like you don't want to notice the narrative. The narrative is almost like it's only like you notice the narrative if it's bad. Then you're like, that's a cheesy movie. That's a stupid movie. And you walk out of there. And that's kind of the same thing with art. Like that problem is now it's like, even if you do something interesting with color, like generally it's so, color is so significant that if you are a master, then with that, then like that will make your art succeed. However, it's kind of like if you're introducing a narrative, which you generally need to, then the problem is when the narrative is bad. If the narrative is bad, then you're going to be like, that painting is annoying or cheesy or it sucks. So it's so weird because you want to create a narrative in order to present the color and the textures, but you want a narrative that actually doesn't mean anything. And then you want a narrative that is not like a bad narrative. Like you want a narrative that is like kind of interesting or witty. And so like the reason you want something kind of interesting or witty is because then people are content with the narrative. And when they're content with the narrative, like it sounds complicated, but it's very simple. When they're content with their narrative, then they're not uncontent, and then they just enjoy the way that the colors put on. And that's what I'm getting to, that people don't get, is like looking at different artists is a way of enjoying and celebrating how they handle the paint. So great artists have this all in common, that they always have a witty narrative, and witty narratives are not just like stories. They could be like visual kind of compositions, kind of like again like a orchestra. um it's like, it's just like, to put it another way, what I'm trying to say that people don't really seem to get is that like they think art is too much about ideas and basically narrative. Like they confuse it by thinking that art is about the narrative, but it's more or less about the narrative not being bad. And in pretty much the only way you can make a narrative not be bad is by being witty, right? So it's like art has to be clever and funny, and like, and then the fact of how the color is handled, which is like the true, then the virtuosity comes out. The virtuosity of color handling and texture handling can sing, then the cream can come to the surface. The virtuosity can sing and it can fly, and the painting can take off in the imagination and in, like in the dream world, in a way. Like then the painting takes on a life of its own, because it all of a sudden it starts to sing, it starts to vibrate on a level that makes it interesting. But like that could be overstating it in a way, that like great painters generally, like I said, it's the same as in any field or in any event where people are competent and masterful in how they handle it, right? So it's kind of like with art, the thing is that people are like, they don't realize that like great artists, they just like, they put out a bunch of paintings and they put out a bunch of narratives that just like when you start to look at art and appreciate art, then what you realize is that it's kind of just like you're meeting voices. Right there, you're meeting voices, because you're meeting the voice of the creator, right? So um like each different artist has kind of like a bunch, like they have a narrative style. And so it's kind of like, what you need to do when you look at art is like, you need to look more like, not at art pieces, like not looking at Like when you think about going to an exhibition, you just see one from this artist, one from that. That's not how you need to think about art. Like how you need to think about art is like getting an anthology, like one of those big art books on one artist, and looking through that, but just quickly. But like looking through it, and then you're like, oh, okay, I get what he's doing. I see kind of his style in a way, right? Then you get another one, and then you're like, oh, okay, see this guy's style, right? Like you flip through this massive book in a couple minutes, and you're like, okay, I get that, right? Then so it's more like kind of like getting a whole bunch of anthologies of artists and flipping through them, and then kind of like seeing, okay, that's that guy's style, that's that guy's style, that's that guy's style. And that's how you need to be looking at art, because like what you're actually saying is, when you're like, it's not that's that guy's style or that girl's style. What it actually is like, okay, that's that guy's narrative, that's that girl's narrative, that's that guy's narrative, etc., etc. But then what happens is like, what you realize is that those accomplished and great painters, their narrative is just a little kind of song and dance. It's just a shtick that works. Like it just, it's a storytelling narrative that really, it just allows them to use their paint and textures in the way that is their personal style and voice. You know, it's the same with writing too. That's their voice, right? That's what you call their voice. That's their personality. And so what you want, what you're really looking for, is every different artist's personality. And like what I think you'll find is that, contrary to what you might think, is that you have certain preferences, is actually more like, whenever people find their voice and their style, whenever they really discover their inner voice and style, it always looks good. But part of discovering their inner voice and style is discovering their choice of narrative. Like they kind of need to have, it's kind of like, again, it's like business. Like you need to have your little game that you present, and that's your idea to come up with that game. So those artists, they have to figure out that game, but it's not the game that sells. The game, like I said, is the game is the narrative, and the narrative, it's not like the narrative is so good. It's only when the narrative is bad that there's a problem. The narrative is just the vehicle for the paint and the textures. The paint and the textures is what sings and what sells, and shows the virtuosity. So what happens is when you're looking at all these anthologies, you come back to them and you're like, you're really looking for each player or each person's virtuosity, you know, like, and that's when you reopen the art books and you're like, that's amazing, you know, because then you start flipping through it and they come up with this narrative. Let's just say a guy he just does planes, like planes all the time, you know, or horses or whatever, you know, like that's an example of some really simple narratives. You might call them themes because they're so simple in a way, but like themes or narratives. But basically you're like, those are like the craziest paintings I've ever seen, and they're all just planes or ideas about planes, maybe kind of abstract, but they all look really interesting. Why? Because they're all about colors, shapes, and textures. Now I've thrown in the shapes word. Now you're going to get really confused. But that's kind of, those are the basic things. But then you're thinking, well, it's all about composition. It's like, it is and it isn't, you know. It's kind of like, it does get technical and complicated in a way with those things, But there's also like things that are quite simple and quite intuitive about that, so it's not like necessarily you have to focus on that, but at the same time that does come into play too. Like those are kind of more like tricks of the trade, like, and in a way they are obstacles or challenges at the same time, because you have to think about them all simultaneously, right? So it's kind of like it can be tricky because it's like all of those things can kind of like contrast with each other and not work. But at the same time, it's better to just keep it simple in your mind. Like, I'm talking about a lot of different things, but really what I'm trying to explain is the way that the narrative actually kind of cancels itself out. That's the kind of irony there. And in a way, that is what narrative is too, is generally is irony. And I think that's why people are misunderstanding art a lot too, is because it's like, listen, you're looking like at it too much, and then you're looking at just one painting from the next, and you're not like most, like when you see those artists, like again grabbing an anthology, or just it's because that's a simple way to see a whole bunch of one artist's work, like they are doing some kind of narrative that is irony. Irony is a very big thing because it sort of seems sort of quintessential to human desire. It's like irony makes us feel comfortable, because like when we see irony, it's like irony is just like a narrative saying to you, it's like, listen, I am just a narrative. Here's my narrative, okay? My narrative is planes, okay? But I'm more or less telling you that's my narrative. And then you're like, okay, I get it. So I don't really have to think about planes. I just want to see how you handle the paintings or the planes, right? So what it's really about is how the person handles that. But you need that thing. You need that irony in order to do it. That's the whole kind of paradox of it. You can't just do nothing. Like you can't just do pure color just splattered all over the place. You need that narrative, and that narrative is kind of like irony. Like you have to have something. So it's like I'm thinking of some of my favorite artists now. In a way, they're kind of like almost cartoonists in a way, because they have a narrative that is kind of like with art, the simplest narrative really is basically just like situations with people, so it's not really generally like taking something like just animals, or like a certain animal, or like just planes or one thing like that. It's more like situations with people. And then, like, it might sound more complicated again, but basically it's an extension of the same idea, like how artists paint people in expressionistic styles is their narrative. So they just create scenes where it's like people doing things, but that is the narrative. And so they have to come up with that narrative, like it's like kind of coming up with a story, but it's like you're coming up with a story for the sake of coming up with a story, because you need that. And that's the story, that's the narrative, that's the game, the plot, the irony, all that thing is kind of the same thing, which basically cancels itself out. Because once the mind has that, then it is content to look at the next level, which is like, okay, this painter is like, they use a lot of red, and they use a lot of like really juxtaposing contrasts or whatever. And that is actually where the virtuosity comes out, and that is what really intrigues you, is the virtuosity. So the narrative is like the painting is not what it's about. It's rather what it's about is what the painting is about. Or if that makes sense, like art is, it's like art, it's, the story is there to serve the colors and the textures in a way. And if you don't have a story that's very compelling, or rather that's, if you have a story that's not compelling, then it annoys you and frustrates you, and it kind of doesn't matter what you do with the color and textures. But basically, like, people want to be pleased and they want to have joy. And so you need that narrative to allow the mind to enter into the painting. But then, like, what I'm saying is, like, when you look at different artists, you're like, you basically see, okay, they're kind of doing the same thing. You're like, okay, I get that. Like, they're doing this thing with scenes or with figures, and, like, let's say they do a lot of still lifes, or they do a lot of flowers, or like whatever, things that you would think are maybe boring at times, but they're not really, because it's not about the flowers and it's not about the people. It's about the way that they paint the people, the colors and stuff, and the shapes and the textures that come out when they paint is what you get interested. So when you actually go back to each of those art anthologies and you look at those artists, it's like you are drawn to that, because all of a sudden you're like, you want to pull out that book again, and you want to see, like, you want to slow down and look at those pictures again. You know, you want to, like the more you look at that book, the more you want to look at it. And it's kind of like you get sucked in, because the more you want to look at it, the more you can't get enough of it. And, like, the more you look at it, the more you don't actually even have time enough to look at it as much as you want to. You know, like, that's the whole thing with art. It's like when artists are good, then that's kind of the vibe that you get from it, you know. And it's the same with poetry. Again, all these things are the same. It's kind of like, you know, like, with Cummings, you know, he wrote that poetry that was just like really chopped up verses and stuff. But then you start to see that he uses really clever kind of word combinations and stuff. And it's kind of like, it's really witty, and it's just like, you realize it's not what the poem's about. It's just these clever sort of like word combinations and stuff. And so that's kind of the same with painters. It's just like, it's basically like every artist is just coming up with these silly stories. But once they master that, then it really becomes about how they master color and texture. That's what's important. And that's what keeps you coming back. You're like, okay, I get their simple storyline. Like, so and so always has, you know, like, people having you know, like in social gatherings or whatever, like that, right? That's just their storyline. And so you always kind of know that most of their pictures have people at social gatherings. And then another artist has, like, let's say, you know, like Marc Chagall or something, has like lots of animals and people dancing and frolicking around and stuff like that. Or, like, you know, like different kind of like mystical things and angels and stuff like that. So you already know that that's kind of Chagall's simple storyline. And that's pretty much like the same with Picasso, or like Miro and stuff like that. they kind of have those similar sort of things, like they're sort of fantastical plots or whatever, but that's basically their simple storyline. So once you know that, you kind of know Picasso, and then you know Chagall, and then you know each of these different artists, like that's kind of their voice and their narrative, you know, their simple storyline. But what keeps you coming back is that, like, you always want to see more of how Picasso handled the paint, because that's his virtuosity, right? And that's like with Chagall, when you see his paintings in real life, they're amazing because of the way he applies the paint to the canvas. And he's a really good example because he's his paintings, the colors are so rich and vibrant, you know, it's almost just like pure pigment splashed on the canvas. But like what I'm saying then to conclude is that people don't seem to get that art is kind of like a game where you need to be able to appreciate more like the simple stupidity of the narratives. That's kind of like you need to be able to appreciate that simple storyline, so that like when you're looking at artists, you're like right away you know what you're looking for. You're like, I want to find out their gig right away. And then once you know their gig, then you can appreciate them. That's kind of like people, like, they're thinking like, what is this painting about? What is that painting about? But that's the totally wrong way. What you are really trying to do is find what's this artist's gig and what's this artist's gig, right? And you can't do that when you go to a famous gallery or whatever, except you can for some people who know those artists because they know their gig. So if they only see one Picasso, it's great because they are what? Seeing a live Picasso in person. But they know Picasso's gig. So then they see one Picasso, and then they see like one Mondrian, and then they see one like Dali or whatever. And each painting is different because they know that artist's voice. Then they know their narrative, right? Like so, like like what people need to do is like, what's the word I just used? That like people, their gig, people need to like if you're going to a gallery with a bunch of painting, like it's kind of confusing. Like I'm contradicting myself a lot. Like you can go to a gallery with a whole bunch of painters that you never know. Like see, like once your mind is on that level, then you already know an artist's gig just from seeing one painting in a way. Like even if you've never seen any of the other stuff, you're like it's kind of weird because like you both need that gig and you don't need that gig. That's the other thing. But in reality, most of the time there is a gig, and that's why like every painting they do is good because they got that gig, right? So it's like, but really, like if you're being introduced to art, like what you're missing is that the whole kind of point is not the point. The point is to see what's their gig, but it's really not about that. It's just that once you know what their gig is, then you can appreciate their paint and their texture, right? So what you need to be doing is looking at art more like that seems like a stupid painting. No, wrong. You're like, what are you looking at? You're looking at the stupid storyline, which is what? That's just their gig, right? So when you look at all these books, you need to like more quickly see like that's an artist, right? That's their story, that's their gig. But once you understand that about each artist, then you can appreciate their paint, or then you can say, no, I don't care for that one. That's kind of like exactly the point you need to get to. You're like, no, I don't care for that one. Like, that guy, yeah, he's painting planes or like scenes or whatever, but you're like, he always uses that like a certain kind of pink or whatever, and I don't like that. Like, it just doesn't really work for me. And you're like, that artist, like, all of, generally you just like, you're not interested in them and you don't look at them again. But with someone else, you're like, you really like the way that they like handle certain colors and textures, and so that's what I'm saying, it keeps you coming back to them and kind of keeps you entranced and enamored and maybe obsessed with their work. But that's the whole game of it, is kind of like, that's the point you want to get to, so that you like I said, it's more like, it's not going to a gallery and just seeing a bunch of different random paintings. What I was trying to say about that was, that can be like, there's kind of like two different things that can be very interesting if you're interested in art. Is like, one, going to see a whole bunch of different paintings by different famous painters that you know and love, because you're seeing them in real life, so it's that much better than seeing them just in reproduction. But the other thing is going to a gallery and seeing a whole bunch of paintings and painters that you don't know, because though a lot of the paintings may not spark an interest, that is a place where you can see really new and fresh things that you've never seen before, and it rekindles some of those first times you see art where you don't know that much, and it right away sparks curiosity and interest in you. But it's different than people that are not really acquainted with art, because to them it just kind of like, there's just too much stuff that doesn't make sense, that the whole thing kind of doesn't really make enough sense to make any sense at all. It's just like the whole thing kind of like almost makes you fall asleep practically. And then like, you might find one interesting, but it's almost not even enough to keep you just from getting bored and sleepy. And that's because you're totally missing it. Like, you should be going there like a person that's interested in art. You're like, you see 10 that don't interest you or create the slightest degree of spark, and you're like, that's normal. Like, how long does it take to see 10 paintings? No time at all. Walk right past them, and then boom, there's one. You're like, oh, that's kind of cool. Then you walk by another 5, and then you see another one. You're like, oh, that's really cool. Like, that's talking to me. You're like, that is very cool. Like, I'm into that. I want to do some of that myself, baby. Like, and then you go on 2 or 3 more. Same thing. You see maybe something that's kind of, and what happens a lot too with paintings is like, when you're on the second round, you're like, that one that kind of seemed like a little bit like, kind of stuck out, but you were not sure if you almost were annoyed by it. Then you come back the second time and you're like, oh, I really like that. I like that even more than the one that totally leapt off the wall. The one that leapt off the wall, it's like, I'm I was over it right away too. Like, it kind of like, it was really flashy and interesting, but it kind of like I will remember it. But this other one that just kind of like seemed a little bit interesting, now seems, on the second time, seems really a lot more interesting already. I find that happens a lot with art and music. That's kind of how I discover a lot of my favorite bands, is the ones that seem a little bit interesting, and then all of a sudden you get into them. And usually what happens is, with those ones, you realize that they have a good narrative, that, again, that simple story, that gig, and that kind of plays on your mind somehow, and it keeps you interested. And then it, like, in order sometimes for that virtuosity of paint to happen, you don't need that much like grandiosity or complexity. You need kind of just simplicity. So once they have that narrative or that simple storyline, then it's just a matter of them just doing what they do. Like, they just paint pictures and let the paint do the talking then, because like I said, paint just looks good. So in a way, all you need to really do is have that gig, that narrative voice, And then by applying that, then what you do is you tap into the fact that that's what people are looking for. And when you create that narrative, that's what they're looking for. But then in the end, what keeps them coming back is the fact that you're putting paint on the paper or on the canvas or whatever else it's on. And that's what people are there for. Because that's in the end what they're looking for. They're looking for paper. They're looking for paint on canvas. But they can't get that unless they find somebody that's got the narrative to present it. So I'm kind of frustrated because I really wanted to do this. I'm starting to understand that with every video that I make, I want to present it in 1 minute, and it always takes an hour. 1 minute becomes an hour every time. I don't know why, because somehow the way that I think is, I think that's why I'm an artist, is because I'm a visual thinker. So I see an idea. I see an idea instantly, and I'm like, I'm gonna finally record this video, and it always takes an hour instead of a minute, because it's like, in order to present an idea actually takes a long time, and I find I'm always doing the same thing. Like, I'm running really tight circles around a point to develop it in order to present it. Like, I just don't know how to do it in any other way. But it seems like it's going to take me 1 minute, but it always seems to take me an hour or two or maybe three, because it requires a certain amount of going around in circles to develop an idea, which I'm not really acquainted with, and yet I should be, because it's not like I haven't had conversations with people. But I think somehow there's a difference in video, is that like the fixation with doing that kind of deceives me somehow, that I think it's really easy. Like, I just picture the idea. I'm like, this is it. Paintings are just about bright color. That was my opening idea. But then what happened is that I got stuck into trying to convey the recipe, which is kind of a problem, because I'm really selling out on art like that. I'm giving away, like, I always end up giving away everything in a way too. Like, I don't know why I'm doing that. Like, that's not my intention. It's more like to break down the stereotypes. So it's like, I'm going to do a 1 minute video that breaks down the stereotypes, but then I spend an hour giving away the gems and the um giving giving away all the secrets in a way. But it's not like I'm really trying to avoid doing that. But at the same time, what happens is that, like, the focus shifted in a way from that original idea to me talking about, like, how this sort of like vortex and paradoxical thing to do with narrative, which is kind of more difficult to explain, and I didn't really intend to do that. I just found myself getting stuck in that little vortex of like it's kind of ironic in itself, because that's the whole thing. It's like, can you actually get that into people's heads? Like, after spending an hour of trying to portray that idea, it's just like, that's what makes an artist as an artist, is you get that. Like, you get how to do that. Like, artists, like, I gotta go to work, I got business to do, like, I gotta, like, they just know that they got this kind of like deal that they got to do. They got this gig, right? And they just got to do that. And then, like, it all works itself out. Like Chagall or Picasso or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just like they got this gig, and then it's like they got a lot of work to do, like, because it seems like, even for the artist, they're just trying to tell this story, but really they're not. They know, even if they don't know, that they want to show you what they're doing with the paint. That's kind of the whole point I keep coming back to, right? And I'm trying to get at. Like, they just think it's about The artists too themselves think it. Like they think it's about this storyline or that storyline, but it's all just about the paint. And it's kind of like the same with fashion. It's just like we still wear shoes, we still wear jackets, we still wear pants and shirts, okay? But what the rage is just like, man, you got these certain colors or a certain way that the the seams on your t-shirt are sewn, and you're like, this is so freaking hot, man. I just can't wait to like bust this out in town, like it's weird. Like it's just the same old thing, but it's like the new take on it. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with art. Is like it's more about just those same, like that's the best example right there. It's just the way it's like fashion, it's just like new runners, new clothes, like it's just the same old things. But the very fact that it's the same old things makes it somehow more about what it's not. It's not about the same old things. That's what cancels it out. It's no longer about the shoes. That's the whole paradox and irony. It's not about the shoes. It's about the fact that they're pink and have like crazy seams on them. That's what it's about now, right? So that's where it shifts to the virtuosity and the masterly handling of it, is because it's not like it's not about the shoe. It's that the artist knew that he needed the shoe to do that pink and those thread patterns. And that's it, like they just knew they had to do it. They're like, I got this new shoe design, I got to do it, man. Like, and it's exactly the same with art and with painting. And so like what people need to realize is that art is just like that. It's like a comic or like a piece of fashion. It's like you know that it's not really about what it's about. That doesn't matter, It's like you just need to know that, like, what you really need to know is that you appreciate art and that you want to see every artist's gig. You like, because when you're looking, like, that's the most important thing about what I'm saying, is that you really need to look at artists. You need to like you need to crave and desire to look at different artists, because what you're doing is you're exposing yourself to their methodologies. And then when you do that, then you're like, oh, okay, this guy's got this quirky little thing where he always paints um people in, like I said, in social gatherings, and then another artist does like whatever, like some other theme, like artists in others or people in other settings. Like it's really like, to talk about it, it's kind of stupid because it's really just stupid stories, right? But somehow that kind of endears us and appeals to us. Like we're like, I like the way he paints those silly, fat people, like Botero or whatever. Like that's just like, it's so silly, right? But like with Botero, it's just like, that was just his brilliance, was like he just painted these people that were like super fat, and you're like, so that's what the painting is about, like really fat people? No, that's exactly what makes it so great, is the fact that they're so fat is exactly what it's not about. What it's about is how he painted them, and how he painted them was great. Like his painting, like Botero's paintings was like so witty, like the savagery with which he handled painting is just brilliant. Like there's a combination of something like super smooth and slick with something like so crude and savage that is just like amazing. Like, you know, he just like his brushwork and stuff was like so awesome. Like, it's kind of like soft and like gentle in a way. I gotta remember Botero. He's like one of my heroes. Like, there's something so seductive about the way that he painted, but then his like presentation of concepts was so savage. You know, like I'm remembering these pictures where there's all these like big cigarette butts lying around or something that just kind of look like fascinating objects. They don't really look like cigarette butts in his paintings because the way he paints them, they look so kind of like, you know, cigarette butts are really kind of gross and dirty, but because of the way he painted them, they kind of look like little candy sticks or something smushed on the ground. They're just like these little interjections of color, like little, like I said, like little candy sticks or something, like smushed candy or something on the floor. I can't remember, you know, like, but I kind of have that vibe that they just kind of like they look kind of fake. They look like toy cigarettes smushed on the ground. I don't know. There's something so kind of ironic and witty about it. It's just like instead of being so dirty and gross, they kind of like they seem appealing. Like, you know, like it's just like they're like little candy sticks or something like that. And that was the whole flavor of all of his paintings, was just like the people were so obese that they were just horrific, but yet they were painted so smoothly and seductively that they were actually just very attractive and charming and sexy in a way. Just very interesting. Like, I'm not sure why or how that works, but somehow I think just like, you know, again, like, well, I should know because that's exactly the whole point. It's just like his colors were so bright and the his handling of the paint was so sexy and seductive in a way. Like, it's just so kind of like smooth and um polished and stuff. And the colors were so kind of like bright and lush and sensitively handled or whatever, and yet the images themselves are kind of so savage. Like the images themselves are both comic and savage at the same time. So you have all these different things going on, like the smooth professional handling of paint with these sort of savage plot lines and stories, and then this sort of comic ironic overtone to everything. So do other people like Botero? Well, the thing is, like, it seemed like when I was looking at him for many years, I was like totally alone in my appreciation of him. And then as we approach his elder days and years, it just seems like he's a huge international icon. This always seems to happen, you know? It's like, I don't know, it's weird. Like, same with like Philip Guston, you know? It's like I remember the first time I saw Philip Guston's pictures, it's just like I was just craving to see more of them. And now, like, you could go on YouTube and you could see so many like Philip Guston videos that it's practically boring. It's weird. Like he just became a huge icon at some point. Like, literally, like, I'm bored of Philip Guston. You know, like, I don't like at one point he was just like at such a pinnacle, to me, like when like that point was when I saw a video of him presented to us in school. I was like, oh man, this is so rad. Like I've been really interested in this guy, and then seeing a video in those days where we didn't have YouTube. I'm not saying the video was so great. I'm saying it was like a good choice by our teacher to pick him because he was kind of an obscure artist, and most teachers didn't even really seem to kind of be very, like it was a good call for him to even find a video on Philip Guston, where like a lot of hardly anybody seemed to ever know him or make any acquaintance to him known at all. So to get a video of him, and he just seemed like so witty and funny and stuff like that. But like I don't really feel that way. Like I kind of feel like, and this kind of applies to a lot of my my favorite artists, is like I kind of feel like they're failures as people. Like I'm always defending Picasso. Picasso is like a huge failure as a man and father in a way, and pretty much every other favorite painter or artist seems like actually like increasingly more as they become an old man, like they seem like failures as a man and as a father, like horrifically so, like appallingly so. And yet I still try to defend him, but at the same time it's like, or them, but at the same time they're like some of the worst fathers I could imagine. Like Philip Guston, like he neglected his own daughter for his career. Like that's just absolutely appalling to me. Like uh, I almost like that, discovering that almost completely made me discredit him without ever a second thought at that point. Like, which is a tall order for me because like I would never really do that with my favorite artists. But like with him, like I don't know, something like it just sort of seemed like I just discovered, like with Philip Guston, it all seemed like a farce in a way. Like it's so weird because like he was kind of like a really accomplished muralist, and like I was attracted to his mural paintings, but I didn't realize just how accomplished he was. And like it's so weird because like I craved to know more about him, and then I learned so much that like the things that I first knew about him seemed kind of almost, I don't know what I'm saying, normal or secondary to the other claim to fame. It's like he lived like two or three different lives in a way. And I was just interested in the one life, but then it's like the other lives took over, and then I wasn't even sure if I was interested in the one that I was interested in anymore. Somehow it's just so weird. Like I don't know, life is so weird. I always just ramble on about things that I just kind of surprise me. It's just like there's just so much content available, and then all of a sudden I discovered some life personal life things that I thought were kind of disturbing. But basically, that's the one thing that stands out. And I always try to be careful about that because, like, to me, like, I don't really know what the story is. But, like, that's a tough one because that is a very straightforward story. And yet his daughter seems to have so much praise for him. So I really appreciate that she does that. And I really like that, kind of makes me think right away, was it really like that? Was that really what happened? But it seemed to me that she herself said it. That's what really cut me to the quick, was like she herself accepted that he had to do that. And I'm like, no freaking way, kiddo. Your dad did not need to do that. He needed to be there and be your dad, not convince you that his career was of such importance that he couldn't be there. So like the question is, was he like the thing is, it's like he just, like, more or less, like he wasn't just like working all the time. Like that is a huge difference to me. Like a dad who's working all the time, I can handle that. That's not a problem. Like a dad who's gone for weeks or months on end touring with their band or something like that, like I can deal with that. That's okay. But a dad who says, I'm abandoning you and your mother. I can't live with you because I need to do my painting career. No, that's not like you're abandoning a child. Okay, like that is not like I just like have no respect for you. You're abandoning a child. Okay, that is like completely different than a father who works night and day and he's too busy to ever see his kid. Like that is very, very different. Like that's one thing, and you are like abandoning your kid. Like that is no. Like I don't care what you're doing with your career or anything like that. Like to me that is like way worse than Picasso. Like people hate Picasso like as a misogynist and stuff. But like Picasso, but at the same time we have this nightmarish thing where Picasso told his own kid that, like that he's like worthless and stuff like that. Like that's where like things with Picasso got just as bad or worse. Like he Picasso abandoned his son and daughter because of the bad relationship with his part with their mother. Like I just don't understand. Like to spite her. Like he basically said, kind of said, if you're like the thing is, I think I think where it really fell apart was that Picasso, like when she wrote that book about him, she underestimated that. Like that was such a low blow and betrayal. Like the thing is that I think like Francois Gillot, like when she wrote that book, she did it actually sensitively. That's the crazy thing. That's what screws with our heads is like, Francois Gillot comes out as the good guy. But that's kind of where like it's both a tribute to her sophistication and her downright low sneakiness because Picasso she would have been nothing without Picasso. She was just some chick. Like, yeah, she's hot. Like, I thought she was hot. And yeah, she probably would have struck some chord of fame in her life, too. Like, I mean, I don't know. But Picasso might have been nothing without her. In a way, Picasso needed his women. But really, I don't know, man. It's just like you don't burn that bridge, man. Like Picasso was obviously an icon of his age, right? So it's just like I'm not saying she should have respected him or whatever, but basically to write a book, no, that's like such a low blow because basically what you're doing is like you're you're basically like exposing Picasso's inner world to the whole public. Like that is such like would you want someone to do that to you? Like just because you're this big rich celebrity, so someone writes, like your wife divorces you and writes a book about you. Like that is just so low in a way. Like but the fact of the matter is that she was almost a child of the new age if you think about it because she wrote it sensitively. I think I haven't read the book and I don't know if I ever will or would. I think she wrote it sensitively. So she kind of like strangely and sneakily praised him in the book. That's what Picasso kind of didn't get. Neither did he care because she did the worst thing. Like I can see how incensed Picasso would be. Like like basically she threatened his entire life with that book. Like how does that feel when you're betrayed by someone? That feels like they basically got their finger right up your ass. Like it's just the most obnoxious thing you could possibly do. And then all of a sudden she ends up writing a book that kind of praises him. Well, okay, so does she absolve herself of the guilt of that? And then like the problem is, did was Picasso, like she kind of like felt justified to do it because he was misogynistic, and so the world takes her side because he was misogynistic. Oh, so she gets to write a book about him. It's like, wait, no, this is like not eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, kind of like what exactly is going on here? Like you have no integrity. Like basically, like to write a book about him. Like, so it's no wonder that he was so incensed by that. Like I can just see that, and yet I know for a fact that the book probably portrays it in a way that doesn't throw dirt on him that much. Like it kind of presents a sensitive picture of him. I think that's the whole gist of it. But Picasso at that point, is like, no, because like what happened is like she crossed some of those barriers where people just shut down. Like I am a fairly forgiving person, but I know how like there's things where you should just shut down, and it's like I think what happens is like when people reach that shutdown point, they're like, nope, never again will I speak to you. That, or like, I just want to emphasize that so much because of that exact, like, people, it's just, it's so